I was awakened one day this past week by a text message from one of my my most conservative friend. He's a guy my age, an educated professional, and a pretty fair racquetball player who regrettably gets almost all of his environmental, financial, and political information solely from Fox News. He was sending me a video clip which he believed would justify his support for Donald Trump. It was an interview with Representatives Wesley Hunt and Byron Donalds from the great states of Florida and Texas. They were passionately telling an entirely apocryphal story about how President Biden was so weak and his adversaries were so not frightened of him that he had been forced to close 7 American embassies, saying that this had never happened before in American history. And then they told a completely fictional story about how Donald Trump had stood up to the Taliban, pointing at them in their chest and telling them, if you harm an American, I will kill you, and then showing them a photograph of their home. I watched this video and went to Google and found their stories to be entirely false. And what is more, while no embassies have been lost under Biden's administration, there have been evacuations due to unrest in 29 embassies. But this happened 37 times during the time that Trump was in office. So I asked my friend, based on your standard of strength in leadership, Trump has been a much weaker president than Biden, so I'm sure then that you will not be voting for Trump on November 5th. To which he replied, I'm not changing my vote. I already pay too much in taxes. Now, my friend's a CPA, so I pointed out to him what he already knows, that unless you're earning over $400,000 a year, your taxes will go down under Harris and up under Trump. I asked him, do you make more than $400,000 a year? And honestly, I've not heard from him since then. I'm certain that if this was a two-way communication situation rather than you simply listening to me on iTunes or YouTube, that most of you would be able to share a very similar story. Similar in the sense that someone has told you something with great confidence, which you were able to quickly demonstrate to be false. And the person who shared that Russian or Chinese propaganda with you, even when confronted with contradictory facts, refuses to change his or her opinion. More than 300 years ago, Jonathan Swift said in a letter to a friend that you cannot use reason to change a person's opinion if they did not arrive at that opinion using reason. Now, we're all going to the polls on Tuesday, provided you've not voted already, and we will wait up on Tuesday night to see if the election is conclusive enough to be decided on that day. Typically, other than the Bush v. Gore contest of 2000, we used to be accustomed to getting the conclusion pretty soon after the polls closed on Election Day. But our nation is now so evenly divided that it's almost impossible to know who's going to win Tuesday night or Wednesday or Thursday or whenever the final decision is made. Now, I know who should win. Most of the people who served in Trump's first administration have said that he has neither the intellect nor the character to be anywhere near the Oval Office again. Several members of his own family, including his sister and his niece, have said the same thing. Prominent members of his party have announced their intentions of voting for Kamala Harris. In short, no one who cares about our economy, our civil rights, who cares about democracy or our foreign policy, or who loves America should vote for Donald Trump. And yet, knowing all of this, about half of all Americans are going to vote for Donald Trump. And no amount of honest information can persuade them to do otherwise. Republicans have spent decades gerrymandering voting districts to try to keep people of color and minority votes from having much impact in the outcome of national elections. I hate it, but I'm ready to propose a certain restriction on voting myself. I wish that only people with an IQ in excess of 140 could be allowed to vote. It would make Election Day very simple, since that would mean less than half of 1% of the population would be eligible voters, and that would also mean that candidates like Trump would never be in danger of being elected. Hats off to Plato, who suggested a government run by philosophers. However, our system allows virtually everyone to vote, no matter how little they know about our government or how much they have been influenced by propaganda, lies, and obvious misinformation. I knew that my racquetball partner was entirely mistaken about what he says about Trump, but I also knew that he's going to vote for Trump no matter how much factual information I might try to share with him. I wish that people reasoned their way into their convictions, but I've been a part of the church long enough to know that even smart people have completely ridiculous things that they believe in because it pleases them to believe it. It pleases them to believe obvious lies, even when they know that they are lies. I don't want to discourage you from trying to talk your crazy uncle off the cliff, but sadly, in all but very rare cases, you cannot use reason or even humiliation to persuade someone to change a conviction that they did not come to by a course of reason. Now, I've always heard that politicians lie. I've tended to believe that they generally are not intentionally lying, that they are very guilty of exaggeration, but I'm a preacher. Who am I to judge? Sometimes they're engaging in wishful thinking. But in this year's campaign, there's been a lot of lying. They're not all lies told by Republicans, but I think it would be safe to say that at least 90% of the political ad lies came from the Republican Party. Writing about 50 years ago, the German-American historian and philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote, "If everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. This is because lies, by their very nature, have to be changed, and so a lying government has to constantly rewrite its own history. On the receiving end, you get not only one lie, a lie which you could go on with for the rest of your days, but you get a great number of lies, depending on how the political wind is blowing. And a person that no longer can believe anything cannot make up his or her mind. It is deprived not only of its capacity to act, but also of its capacity to think and to judge. And with such a people, you can then do whatever you please." She wrote that as a German Jew who had escaped the Holocaust and made it to America, but obviously she was reflecting on how Nazis had managed to take control of Germany, not by convincing the German people to believe their propaganda and their lies, but by leaving them bereft of a willingness to believe deeply in anything at all. And that was a long time ago. We had reason to hope that with the advent of the internet and then smartphones, such that we all carry the information superhighway in our pockets, we have constant access to any published information that could be found in all of the libraries of the world right in the palm of our hands. But rather than making us more informed, it appears to have shortened our attention span and made it seem like finding out what is true is just too hard, too time consuming. It requires too much energy, too much thinking, so much so that even bright people will brag that they no longer read newspapers or watch any news sources. Instead, they passively allow their minds to be filled with propaganda, pornography, and videos of talking cats and dogs. It doesn't mean that most people are stupid, but it does mean that they are stupid adjacent. They could be more informed, but they hear that Biden has closed 7 embassies, and they like believing that Biden is a confused and weak man, so that they will believe he has closed 7 embassies and not allow themselves to become better informed. And learning that Trump actually evacuated embassies more often than Biden is equally meaningless because they never cared about embassy evacuations in the first place. Such issues are useless except for what my mother called mindless beauty shop gossip. It gives them a certain thrill to believe even obvious lies. Nazis also used a great deal of fear in their propaganda. It doesn't have to be true if the threat you mention presses a hot button of a familiar fear. Governments often try to unite and control their populations by stoking fear of a common enemy. Anyone that they can portray as being other than they are can become their enemy. Of course, the Nazis were ultimate racists and homophobes. I don't know if Trump is knowingly imitating Nazis or if it's just his natural prejudices that also make him a terrible racist and homophobe. It's no great mystery why he's continued to beat the drum about the entirely legal immigrants from Haiti who live in Springfield, Ohio. Haitians are black. They speak with an accent. Their cuisine, while delicious and wonderful, also smells different from our more familiar hamburgers and fries. Republican politicians in Springfield, Ohio, have refuted all of Trump and Vance's lies about these Haitian immigrants. But again, the facts don't matter if you're stoking fear, and people are vulnerable to fear. As Harris has risen in the polls in these past few weeks, Trump's lies and name-calling have just truly gone off the rails. He started months ago accusing her of only recently identifying as being black when she had gone to a historically black college and joined a famous black sorority when she was a teenager. But it's gotten uglier. He says that she is mentally impaired. He calls her Comrade Harris. And even though he accuses Democrats of weaponizing the justice system, he insists that she should be prosecuted and incarcerated. He says that she is a communist and that if she is elected, she will turn every city and state in the United States into the third world country. He claims that she has promoted open borders, that she stopped prosecution of violent crime. He's even said that if she is elected, an illegal immigrant will probably come into your kitchen and cut your throat. If facts matters, voters would know that violent crime is down, that illegal immigration is even down. Our economy is the envy of the world. He throws out this libel only to hit fear buttons in a gullible public. There's no information being shared in what he says. Trump is the one who bows to the will of communist dictators. Trump is the one who plays golf more often than any other president, even though he said he wouldn't play at all while president. And he doesn't even attend briefings. When he was president, he didn't attend briefings. He didn't read the daily reports that were prepared for him, classified reports, even the ones that he stole and left unguarded in a bathroom in his hotel, he didn't read. Pollsters never want to infer why it is But they always note that Trump gets more support from people who do not have a college degree, and Harris gets more support from more educated people. They poll the demographics, they just don't want to say that education makes a person less inclined to fall for the lies and largely Russian and Chinese propaganda that Republicans are always repeating. But there is very little time left before the polls close on Tuesday. And I can only implore you, my listeners, my friends, my supporters, my peers, to make sure that you vote before the polls close on Tuesday if you have not already voted. There are virtually no undecided voters left to persuade in this highly divisive election year. Now it's just a matter of voter turnout to determine who's going to win. So please, please, don't tell yourself that you can sit this one out. Your vote matters. Please vote.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.